Okay, so last time the question was asked, is it right or wrong to support the state of Israel? So, and that's a very interesting question, and I mean, you could always do the short answer, but in order to understand the short answer, you kind of got to go back a little bit and find out the reasons why people support the state of Israel. And it is what is called Christian Zionism. Okay? Christian Zionism, where Christians support the boundaries of Israel and the Jewish people being there. This is actually a very old belief that we see this among the Puritans, and a lot of these names should be familiar, like Charles Wesley, or Increase Mather, or Jonathan Edwards, right? That they believed that there would be a mass conversion of Jews at the end, a national conversion, and they based this off of Romans 11. Matthew Henry, who was a commentator on the Bible, and his commentaries were very popular among Missouri Synod Lutherans a generation ago, also believed that that the Jewish branches are reckoned holy because the root was so, and this is expressed even more plainly in Romans 11:28, that they will not be completely cast off, but that there will be a national conversion. Okay? So that's what it was in the 19th, up till the 19th century, right? There were many Protestants who believed that there would be a great national conversion of the Jews. But in the 1820s, there's a huge shift where there's a doctrine called premillennialism that comes to the foreground, and it has to do with what people believe about the end times. And John Nelson Darby, who wrote the Scofield Bible, that commentary, is said to be the father of dispensationalism in the United States. These are views of what the end times are going to be. And I have a few nifty charts here on your handout. So, has anyone here heard of the Left Behind series? It was popular about 10-15 years ago. Those fictional books are really teaching tools. And what they're doing is, through fiction, they're teaching what they believe the end of the world is going to be like. For the Left Behind series, the world, the end is going to be what is called dispensational premillennialism, where there are different dispensations or ages, right? Okay, so right now we are in the church age. At the end of the church age, the righteous dead will be raised, and there will be a rapture, where all of those who believe will suddenly disappear from their cars or airplanes, or when they're walking their dogs, or something like that. Okay? During this time, there will be what they call the tribulation of 7 years. And during this 7 years, there will be the reign of the Antichrist, which they believe is not the Roman pontiff, as we've talked about before, but is some political leader who is going to exercise universal dominion over the world. during this time, the restoration of the Jews to Palestine, the conversion of the remnant of Israel, that's a big one, right? All the Jews will convert. The temple will be rebuilt. The priesthood, the sacrifices, and the cult ritual will be restored. After that, Christ will descend, and the tribulation saints and the Old Testament believers will be raised, and there will be the battle of Armageddon, where the Antichrist, who is a political leader, will be destroyed. And then you will have a millennium, a 1,000-year period where Christ will rule on earth with the saints and the godly. And after that 1,000-year period, Satan will be loosed for a time, and then the judgment of the wicked and the eternal state of man. Okay? So, and then I added in a different form to historical premillennialism, which isn't as complicated, but is still pretty complicated, right? And then we have postmillennialism, which just means where people actually believe that the world would just keep getting better and better. And this was really, really important. This was what most Americans believed between 1850 and like World War I. That just the world would keep getting better, the gospel would increase and advance, and there would be a gradual Christianization of the entire world. We are amillennialists. We believe that we are in the millennium now, that we are living in the last days, and that Christ's return, the general resurrection of the righteous and wicked, the final judgment, and the eternal state will all be done in order simultaneously, as opposed to premillennialism, where Jesus comes back for the rapture, and then he comes back again to rule, and then he comes back again to So, they are peculiar readings of Revelation chapter 20. Yeah, is it their own interpretation? Well, they would say that they're reading it literally. Okay. But, and that's when we do Revelation, after we're done with Genesis, we'll talk about interpretation of texts. Say that again?
What chapter you said?
Revelation chapter 20. In particular.
On the first two, do they believe there's a hell?
Yes, they believe there's a hell. But they also believe that all believers will be raptured, taken from this earth, and basically saved from the tribulation. Okay? And those people who are still here during the tribulation, as long as they don't get the mark of the beast on their hands and forehead, which they think is some sort of barcode or thing for buying things or whatever, you see, they don't even take it literally, because they don't believe that an actual 7-headed beast with 7 literal horns and 10 literal crowns is going to come out of the sea. They don't believe that. That is ridiculous. So, they don't believe that, right? So, and that's why it's a shame that they say that that's taking it literally, right? Because they don't even take Revelation literally. Because if they did, then it would have to be, then Jesus, when he says, I am the door, would literally have to be a door, right? Is that what Jesus means? No, that's not what literal means either. Literal means the intended sense, right? And when I say it's cool, am I talking about the temperature?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well, you could
I could be. But more than likely, what am I talking about?
How you're dressed.
Right. Or if I say, that guy's a dog. Is he really a dog? No. Right? So, literal means what is intended by what is being written here, right? It has to do with genre, and it has to do with context, right? Apocalyptic literature and Revelation is read differently, as we see from the book of Daniel, right? The best interpretive lens of Revelation is Daniel, because everything is explained. So anyways, getting back to our question about the state of Israel. Dispensationalism, which is taught at the Southern Baptist Seminary in Dallas, Texas, where actually one of my professors went for a time to get his PhD in homiletics. That's actually a very big place where it's taught. Rejects the notion of supersessionism, the idea that the church has succeeded the Jewish nation as the definitive people of God. It still considers the Jewish people as God's chosen people, and some see the modern state of Israel as resulting in the Israel who will receive the fulfillment of all God's Old Testament prophecies. Okay? Today, I give a few examples of people who believe this, and some of them are very famous. Some of you guys like Hal Lindsey, or Jerry Falwell, or Pat Robertson, or even presidential candidate Ted Cruz supports Christian Zionism for this very reason. Okay? So, what is the Lutheran response to this? Lutherans are amillennial. We've always rejected Chiliasm, or millennialism, that there's a literal 1,000-year reign. We reject both premillennialism and postmillennialism. We believe that the coming of Christ, the general resurrection, the final judgment, and the end of the world are immediately united, and one follows the other without an interval of time. And for more information, please read the CTCR document, A Lutheran Response to Left Behind. I printed off 10 of them. They're very good at talking about what do we believe about the end times and how do we differ from especially this Left Behind, but also a lot of Christians in the United States. I still have quite a few friends in college who believe that there's going to be a rapture. They couldn't hardly believe when I told them that that was nonsense. So after all that build up here, let's get to the actual question, right? The support of the state of Israel. The passage which is often used to support the state of Israel and the general conversion of the Jews is Romans 11:25 through 26, where Paul writes, "For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob." So that's usually the passage that they use in order to justify that all Israel will be saved. Okay? Which, taken out of context, that's what it would seem to mean, right? So, this proposition here is universal, but it's not absolute. Otherwise, justification by faith alone would be a fiction, right? Because then it wouldn't just be by faith alone, but it would be because of the thing we all hate. Who is your daddy? Right? That's exactly it. The Jews would then be blessed not because they believe in Jesus, but because they are the physical descendants of Abraham. Okay? So what does this end up doing? Well, this ends up turning justification by faith alone into a lie, into a fiction. Because then you have people who are blessed not because they believe, but because of their blood, because of who their fathers were. Now, the limitation here, of course, is always unbelief. It doesn't matter who your daddy is, if you don't believe, right? This is why going back and reading the whole chapter of Romans 11 is so very good at putting this into context, right? Romans 11, 2 through 3. God has not cast away his people whom he foreknew. Or do you not know what the scripture says of Elijah, how he pleads with God against Israel, saying, Lord, they killed your prophets and tore down your altars, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. Does anyone know the reference there? From Elijah, when he's talking with God. He's complaining, and then what God says is that, there are 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal, nor have their lips kissed him, right? What St. Paul here is saying is that God has not cast away his people whom he foreknew. That is, those who he foreknew would have faith. Right? Again, Romans 11:5. Even so then, at this present time, there is a remnant according to the election of grace. The election of grace is that God calls, gathers, enlightens, and sanctifies. Not just the Jews, but also the Gentiles. And then Romans 11:23. And they, the Jews also, if they do not continue in unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. You see, as long as the conversion of the Gentiles continues, so too will the conversion of the Jews continue. Even though the vast majority of them have forsaken their Messiah, God still calls them, and some of them actually do come to faith. And this will continue throughout the entire New Testament age. This is why every Good Friday we have two prayers. Well, we have a lot of prayers, but there are two in particular. There's a prayer for the Jews. Man, you guys weren't listening. We pray for the Jews every Good Friday, right? That God would lift the veil from their eyes and convert them. And the second are for the heathen, those who still do not believe in Jesus, right? So that's the thing. The Jews have a chance as long as the New Testament age continues. Until Christ comes back, there will be Jews who will be converted. They will be grafted back in through faith. Until Jesus comes back, and then there will be no more time for faith, right? And the physical descendants of Abraham are not his children when they do not believe in Christ, right? What makes you a son of Abraham? Faith, right? John 8:39, they answered and said to Jesus, Abraham is our father. Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. That is, you would believe in me. Abraham rejoiced to see my day. Or Romans 4:16, therefore it is of faith that it might be according to grace, so that the promise might be sure to all the seed, not only to those who are of the law, that is the Jews, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. Or Romans 9, 6 through 8. Right? But it is not that the word of God has taken no effect, for they are not all Israel who are of Israel, nor are they all children because they are the seed of Abraham. But in Isaac your seed shall be called. That is, those who are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted as the seed. Here in Romans 9, 6 through 8, it's very clear. Not all those who are descended from Abraham belong to Israel. Who belongs to Israel? Those who are of faith. What makes you a child of Abraham? Faith. It doesn't matter who your daddy is. It doesn't matter who your ancestors are. But those who are children those who are children of the promise, that is, those who believe in Jesus, who trust in his promises and cling to them, are counted as the seed. You guys are the new Israel. Not because of blood, but because of faith. And then once again, Romans 11, 19 through 23. You will say that branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well said. Because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Do not be haughty, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he may not spare you either. Therefore consider the goodness and severity of God on those who fell, severity, but toward you goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And they also, if they do not continue in unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. Here he's talking about those Gentiles who are bragging that they're in the church, but the Jews aren't. And what is St. Paul saying? Once again, it's by faith. If you do not continue in the faith, you too will be cut off. And if the Jews come to the faith, they will be grafted back in. Right? That's why it doesn't pay to be haughty. Right? Because ultimately, if God did not spare the natural branches, the Jews, he won't spare you either if you don't believe. Right? So, finally, conclusion, right? If you support Israel because of these eschatological reasons, if you support Israel because you think that they are the chosen people of God, if you think that them having a nation in the Middle East and is going to bring about the end of the world, then yes, you err because you misinterpret God's word. Right? Then it is not right for you to support the state of Israel. Now, as an ally, should we support the state of Israel?
Yes.
Yeah, we should. Definitely.
It's no different than Japan or...
Than any other country, right? We support our allies. We go to war for them, like Kuwait or whatever. But the problem is in this country, this end-time thinking and politics has been so hopelessly tangled, right? That it seems like if you support the one, you're saying that you believe the other. And so I think that's where we have to be very clear, especially with our politicians. Like, Cruz had a lot of good things to say, but on this point, he was very, very wrong. Right? So, I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. But it all has to do with who is God's people now. Those with faith. That's where, St. Paul makes this very clear in the book of Romans. And that's why Romans 11, needs to be, and this is why you can't just take verses out of context, right? Because if you just took Romans 11, 24 and 25 out of context, then yeah, you would say, yeah, well, all Israel has to be saved. That's what it says. But this is why we don't take verses out of context, but we read it within the flow first of the chapter, and then of the section, which is Romans 9 through 11, and then in the context of the entire book, and then in the context of the entire Bible, right? So, the Jews are not God's people because the majority of them do not believe. And this is another thing too, like if you look back at some of these charts here, you see here that the restoration of Jews to Palestine, the conversion of the remnant of Israel, the temple rebuilt, the priesthood, the sacrifices, and the cult ritual restored. You see, a lot of these dispensational premillennialists don't understand the reason for the ceremonial law. What was the point of the temple? Anybody? Right, it was a place for sacrifice. It was also a picture of Jesus' body, right? Right? Doesn't Jesus say in John chapter 2, destroy this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days, right? The temple was a foreshadowing that God would come and dwell with his people. Not in a temple made with hands, but with a temple made without hands. That is his own body, right? That the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us, right? That's where the difference between the English and the Greek kind of loses, because yeah, it does mean dwelled, but it actually means, it's actually the same word as to tent, right? To tent, to tabernacle among us, to come and be with us. What was the point of the priesthood? What?
Intermediary between us and God.
Right, an intermediary between us and God. And they did two things. What are those two things? They prayed for the people and they sacrificed. Well, what is this a picture of? Jesus, our great high priest, who made the once for all sacrifice on the cross. Right? And does he continue to pray and intercede for his people? Yes. So why do we need the Levitical priesthood? We don't. We have a better priest. We have a priest who will never, ever, ever die. The sacrifices, what are they signs of? The cross, right? That without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. These point forward to what Jesus did on the cross. And if his sacrifice is sufficient to pay for all sins, past, present, and future, then why do you need any sacrifices? You don't. The cult rituals like kosher meals and dressing a particular way and all that, these are all things to set the people of Israel apart from all the other nations, to show that from them would come the Messiah. I mean, do you put up posters for a concert that's already happened? No, of course you don't. That would be dumb. So why would you continue with kosher laws and the like, now that Christ has come? We see this in Acts. Rise, Peter, kill and eat. Or in Colossians chapter 2. Therefore let no one judge you for a new moon or a Sabbath, right? Because these things were the shadow of the things to come. And Christ is the substance. Right? So these people completely don't understand what all of the Old Testament ceremonial laws were for. If they're reinstituted, then these people are under the law, not under grace. So this is, that's why eschatology, what these, and what does it finally end up doing? It ends up undercutting everything that Christ came to do. And it makes the Old Testament basically a closed book for the rest of us, because none of you are Jews. Right? So then what's the point? So that's where this is really, really bad, right? That it's not just about Israel. That's only part of the problem, which undercuts justification by faith. But they don't understand how to read the Old Testament. They don't understand the purpose, why God gave us all these things. For them, it's just another way to establish that these are the things that the Jews do, but they have no conception why they do them. Which is really sad, because then why? Right? Just because God told them to? Well, I mean, I guess that's one reason, but our God is not an arbitrary God either. So, but any questions on any of that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if Israel were to be defeated
Yep.
in, let's say, battle, then their enemies could say, well, God didn't want it, even though you might not believe anyhow, so they would use that to their benefit? Or?
That would be one thing. What I could see happening is a lot of these people, they give tons of money to Israel every year in order to support them for this very reason. And to me, it is kind of scary, because if something like the 7-Day War would happen again, where all of the Arab countries attacked Israel, Israel would win because they're superior in firepower and most of their citizenry can be mobilized, right? But you're talking about tons and tons of bloodshed and a lot of death and destruction all the way around.
I think they would unleash nuclear weapons on the capital cities of the nations attacking it. I mean, that's what they would do.
Right.
That's why we intervene in that region.
Right. Because, I mean, things could get ugly very, very, very quickly. I mean, they're already not all that pretty, but so yeah, I don't think Israel could be defeated. I think that their technological advances and the training that they give to their soldiers, it would take, someone would have to nuke Jerusalem, and that's not going to happen, because the people who would nuke them are the people who also think Jerusalem is a holy place for Muslims, right? Now,
part of their protection then too, isn't it?
right. I mean, it's kind of a, since it's a holy site for both Islam and Judaism, it's going to be pretty well, That doesn't mean there couldn't be a lot of, smaller bombings, car bombings, all that kind of stuff. So, which happen on a pretty daily basis over there anyways. And the whole problem is that what is not being proclaimed, either to the Jews or to the Palestinians in that region? The gospel. Right? That's like the main thing, right? They're too busy trying to establish the state of Israel while these people are dying in unbelief. So,
Well, if somebody comes in there and tries, they tell the Christians if they can.
Some of them, yeah. But when your whole, theology is based upon these dispensations, at this moment, it's not all that important to evangelize, right? Because what's the first thing you got to do before the general conversion of the Jews? Get them all there and establish the state, right? Which is once again a mixing of the two kingdoms. So yeah.
I was watching Steve Colbert show all night last week. I guess I wasn't watching.
I'm sorry.
It'll come on after the news. I was reading, but about 11 o'clock. And I don't know who his guest was. I wasn't paying attention. But I heard him say something about the Reformation. I heard that word. And then they started discussing it a little bit. And he said, well, he didn't say Lutherans. He said some people believe that there's no purgatory. And he was just really upset because if there's no purgatory, he said some people believe you either go to the heaven or you go to the other place. He said that there was no purgatory. And he thought, well, that's what we give money for. He said that help them out or make sure that. He was just upset. He was disappointed.
Yeah, I'm never sure about how much of that is an act or how much of that is, because I'm pretty sure Stephen Colbert knows,
Stephen didn't say so much. It was his guest that was really disappointed. Like evidently he'd given money.
Right.
It's like
So-
Bill Nye,
Well, you're both Catholic.
they're entertainers, not scientists or experts.
Yeah, well, and the thing is I mean, if you don't believe that you're justified by faith alone, that you're justified by faith and works, then, I mean, you want purgatory. Because, let's face it, you're not that good. Right? And if you need to be perfect to see God, you want that,
Purgatory. It just blows my mind how they think they can ever get out of purgatory, though. I mean, since we're not good, I mean, there's not enough money on earth that could get somebody out.
Yeah, well, see, purgatory is the cleansing fires. It's like putting a lump of gold that's mixed in with a bunch of other dross, and you put it in the fire, and you burn the dross off.
I think he was counting on that for himself. I mean, there wasn't any-
Yeah, well, because, at least if you're in purgatory, I mean, you're not in hell,
Yeah.
and you'll eventually make it. It might be a long, long time, right?
I'll bet you this 500th anniversary of Reformation had gotten out someplace and he mentioned Reformation. I thought, whoa, well, this jail?
Well, because Colbert is actually a pretty solid Roman Catholic, if I...
Yeah, he says he doesn't, but he mentions that all the time.
Mhm.
But
So,
this other guy must have been too. He was downright disappointed today.
Well, you must believe it. then.
Opposite of Luther now this morning, he said there's an hell and there's people on their way to do it,
right? That's the thing. I mean, if you get justification wrong, you want purgatory. And
I think he thought he needed it.
and you want the merits of the saints, right? You want things like indulgences and prayers and all that kind of stuff, because otherwise you're toast in all of the varieties you can imagine. So, but, all right, well, next time.